name is John S. May Jr.
Tracy Basso.
Chris Weekly.
Hi, I'm Dean Hickman Smith. Before working with Smead, I've been in America for 24 years and I had a sort of progressive experience in accounting. First of all, I tried to do it myself, which was a disaster. Then I was recommended to talk to Michael, in fact, through my real estate. And my realtor knew Michael and the Smead company. So I gave him a call, and since then they've genuinely made my life a lot easier.
I would say the biggest pain point has to do with being able to shelter our tax protection or be able to save money on taxes. That's always been my biggest challenge. We've tried multiple CPAs and they do what they call it transactional services, right? Mm-hmm. So you give them a data and they vomit the data out and give it to you. So that was a big headache that we had, and I get to know about Smith. I think through it's about 2 or 3 layers, so to speak. I kind of eventually get to know about Smith services, but at the time that was their biggest headache. Or how can we save on taxes?
I've been a podiatrist for 30 plus years. The harder I worked, my corresponding income that I got to keep was not tracking with the amount of work volume that I saw. I ended up reading a book by Tom Wheelwright. I think it was Tax-Free Wealth, as I think the title of the book. And it had some basic strategies, but they had a group called Wealthability. And so I joined that group. And through that group, I met Michael, and then the rest is history.
Well, I think that a lot of accounting firms and accountants, I don't think that they really focus a whole lot. I mean, they focus on the tax code, but not in the same way, because, obviously Michael, his approach or Smead's approach is, that of, he was one of the accountants on the Rich Dad, Poor Dad team. So it's changed how we look at pretty much everything from, our real estate company owns our house and we rent, our house from that company. And so there's lots of little nuanced things that really have expanded our access to capital and be able to grow.
When I moved to Byron, I bought a ranch. So we opened a small ranching business, specializing in breeding a particular type of European horse in America, a very high value type of horse for competition use. And what really I liked about the conversation with Michael was that he understood basically the frameworks that optimize those 3 things. One was optimizing, my W-2 regular income from my permanent employment, whilst optimizing the situations around this kind of agricultural business on one side and my tech business on the other. And he could understand how to optimize those 3 different things. He was very conversant with, all of the tax sophistication, complication, the ramifications of all the new tax laws in those areas, and he really helped me optimize each of those individual pieces. He looked at everything from a very holistic perspective, including like where I live, how I live, where I worked, when I worked from my home, how I could optimize, my domestic situation, how I could optimize the property, how I could optimize all of my tools, like my cars. I have some aircraft that I use, and he managed to find tax optimization strategies for each of those different components of my tax makeup, which now sounds a bit complicated. It isn't really that complicated, but Michael managed to optimize each of those 3 different components. So I was very impressed with his knowledge of those areas. And when I did some reference checks, people agreed that he was just a very legitimate advisor.
I think trust is built over time. I think the first trust kind of started with cost segregation was one of the biggest one, right? To do cost segregation and making sure that it's not just, okay, you're writing off property or whatever, but as a way to do that, to make sure that I have a cost segregation engineers that actually be able to kind of do that the way it ought to be, right? So that's one area that I think is a big win when it comes to what needs to be done and how it should be done. And the second one, it has to do with being able to have a strategy when it comes to asset protection and what that has to do with tax as well, because they all kind of go hand in hand in terms of asset protection and tax. They're all together. You cannot separate those. So the fact that he understands that and knows exactly what it is, it's a win-win. That's one big thing for us, that we build and develop the trust over time.
Anyway, it was a growing process, but certainly like one of the first rounds that we were doing where it became clear that Michael already had some answers for, some of the significant potential tax liabilities that I was facing. So that was super, super helpful. And Michael's very engaging. He's smart. He listens, he is very articulate, and he clearly had the sophistication that I was looking for sure.
So my wife originally went to Michael, and she went to a number of accountants throughout the Bay Area, and she had this question, or she basically said, I'd like to pay taxes like Donald Trump. I know that's controversial for some, but she got laughed out of a number of firms. And then finally she met Michael, and Michael was like, okay, I know what you're saying here. You want to take as much advantage of the tax code as possible. And so that's where my wife, Tiffany, was like, this is where we got to go. And so that's that.
So thinking about my personal situation, I had a lot of assets that were not being depreciated or tax optimized. So things like vehicles that I used for work, vehicles that I used for the ranch, vehicles that I used purely for business travel, and then some things like tractors and other things that are just used for day-to-day work around the ranch. There were some very useful tax optimization strategies that he was able to introduce me to in terms of depreciation or utilization of my domestic house as an office, and how much and how to account for that, which was not something that I'd done previously. And then I would say that there was just a tremendous focus on cleaning up my expenses, my billing, my fiscal kind of well-being. The bookkeeping side of the house really helped me clean up my return, helped me get my billing in shape, just really worked with me to optimize how I present the taxes, because it's just they have a very clean approach so that things get processed quickly, efficiently, and with optimum effect. So longer term, I'm going to continue to optimize my tax strategy closely.
I think one scenario I can think of is a strategy as well, which is where you pay for you to cut on taxes. You invest in this deal for like 100,000, and at the end you save about 500,000 to 700,000 in tax saving, right, from the get-go. Though at the end, after 5 or 7 years, you can reverse because they will be giving you dividends back. But that is one thing that I learned. It's one thing for you to know it, but another thing for you to really make sure that it's actually applicable, or as someone who can actually, I would say, engineer or spearhead on how that should work specifically.
One of the like I said, one of the first things that we did you guys were the CPA. He had recommended a program for me. It was GFX, and it significantly changed the tax profile for me personally, literally first tax return out of the gate. And there were several options on the table. We ended up picking that one, and it was very, very effective. And so, like I say, I was a believer from the beginning, but you become more of a believer as he's doing it.
I think the big thing, it really comes down to the structure of our business entities. I kind of spoke to this just a minute ago, talking about our rental company, owning the house, well, actually our holdings company, but then we're renting the house through the rental company. And there's a whole, I guess, flow of how capital is transferred to and from different entities so that we have the biggest tax advantage, but we're also kind of compartmentalizing our risk as well. And that was something that I was like blown away when I initially started working with Smead, and just understanding, like, it was like Aladdin, a whole new world. So there was a lot that I didn't understand about business structure or estate structure, and that's something that's been huge.
I would say the one thing that is changing is really the discipline in how I structure the fundamentals of the business, like the billing, the receivables, the tax deductible expenses, and everything else are much better categorized. Yeah, I'm just going to become more and more efficient. I was not very efficient, but my consulting business is starting to grow quite nicely. So that I'll be putting some frameworks together there to really scale that thing. And then the horse breeding business, we've gone through like 5 years of breeding where it's very capital intensive. Now we're going to be selling quite a few animals, so we should be more on the receivable side now, looking at how we optimize and reinvest the money from that business. So yeah, I'm going to be just continuing to work with the team to try and optimize and how we structure all these things, and then how we protect ourselves for the long term. I think that's the next phase of evolution of the relationship with Smeed.
I don't do anything, hopefully, without asking Michael and my attorneys now. So definitely, we have regular meetings, and I run a lot of strategic stuff past Michael so that we can do it in a tax efficient way. He can help shape and guide. And that I find is very, very helpful and very, very important. So, all business activity going forward, Michael's been very helpful in how to form it, how to categorize it so that we're really prepared on it from a tax standpoint. That's something I never done before.
I think the big thing is that one, there's an approach of, basically, money in versus money out, and what's the best strategy for right now, our current conditions. As an example, like maybe we don't want to have a profit for the year because we're trying to potentially build capital in the following year to be able to purchase a property or a business or something like that. It's like we close valves and open other valves to really get us on the path of whatever our strategy is for that year or in the next couple of years.
I would tell them that they're making a very large mistake if they haven't done a comprehensive plan. And I have suggested, Michael, to 7-figure business owners, to 8-figure business owners, and 9-figure business owners. It should be absolutely critical to your overall business vision and goals as well, because it's one thing to make the money, it's another thing to keep it and manage it, and hopefully do some good things with it down the road rather than hand it to the government.
My advice would be get in touch with a CPA firm that can help you. It's a relatively low cost investment, and it pays for itself very, very quickly. I was probably leaving $50,000 to $100,000 of money on the table every year at least, and I've probably done that for at least a decade. So if you've got a business, find a CPA. I do recommend Smeed. I do recommend talking to Michael and the team, because they're very, very good at what they do, and they're very nice people to deal with. So that's pretty much my summary of what I would do if I was talking to someone like me who hadn't gone through this.
Web strategy is a task strategy, right? Task strategy is a web strategy. You need to do both. You need to understand both, right? And someone who's earning 7-figure, if they leave money on the table, let's say they pay more taxes, for instance, then they have to look at some other, just advice that they need to look for. They need to find a CPA, a company who can give them some advice on how to do their taxes or how to structure their business, right?
I think, as a business owner, we're always trying to find ways to cut costs, but not reduce the, value of the product, not take anything away from employees, but still, we're trying to be as efficient as possible. And when you look at, a good accounting team, it's not going to be necessarily cheap. And so that's a hard pill for people to swallow. But it's like, I look at it like, hey, well, it's money out, it's an investment now, but the dividends will be much greater further down the road, and everything will be cleaner. People make mistakes with their taxes all the time, and it's like, why not have like an expert in it so that you're not in a really bad position later on? Go talk to Smeed.